Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm talking 5-star predictions, but this time we're doing a wrap up for my fiction list. So I put up my wrap up for my non-fiction in the last video, feel free to go check that out. But this time we're going to be talking about the fiction predictions that I made in January, and I've read all bar one of them and I'm not going to get to that last one before the end of the year, so I thought now would be a good time to wrap it up and draw a line under this as a TBR in general. This was actually a fairly successful list. We have a couple of surprise really didn't likes, but the rest of them were pretty much either 4.5 or 5 stars, and my distinction on those really depends on the day. There is no real meaning to my 4.5 to 5. I don't have a consistent rating system. So let's jump in and talk about the books. We're going to go from least enjoyed, that's probably not how you say that, up to most enjoyed. Yeah, sure, why not? And the first one we're going to talk about is a DNF, and that is The Dog Star by Peter somebody, and I can't remember because I've already given the book away. This was one of the first books that I read off of my TBR list, and I was really expecting to enjoy it. It's a post-apocalyptic fiction, which is straight up my street, and it's about a guy who has like a little biplane, and he thinks he's pretty much by himself, but then one day he sees another biplane. It's about him trying to reach out to this person. Now, this should have ticked all my boxes. It's really obvious why it's on a 5-star list for me. Like, this should have been perfect as a read, but I didn't like the formatting at all. It was written in more of a stream of consciousness style. There was very little like distinction between speech and sort of like internal thought processes and narration, and I don't have the time for that kind of writing. I think that the conventions of punctuation are perfectly valid and they work for a reason, and I do get really frustrated when authors decide to abandon them for, in often my opinion, no real benefit to the story, and they just make it harder to get into. And like, if I really had bothered to sit down and try, I might have been able to kind of get past this, but I knew that this was going to colour my reading experience of the book as a whole, and I just wasn't invested in trying to get through it. That, and I wasn't particularly into the characters. I probably read like 40 or 50 pages of this and was just like, I'm not really bothered right now, so it's time to walk away and not waste time on this one. So this was the only DNF. Then we have a 3-star read, and that is Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. So this is a book set in Russia, and it's about Russian folklore and a girl who gets, I think she gets like taken away, and she's sort of like reliving this mythology over and over and over again. Again, this should have been right up my street because there's another book on this 5-star predictions as part of a series which is all about Russian folklore, and I really enjoyed that. I think Russian folklore is fascinating in general. I generally enjoy historical fiction, and this had all the components that I should have enjoyed, but the thing that didn't work for me is Catherine M. Valente's writing style. It felt very choppy, and there was just something about it that didn't really click, and this is something that I've heard about her work before. She seems to have a big kind of Marmite effect on people. People either really enjoy her writing or find it a little bit grating, and it's quite difficult to kind of articulate exactly why. So all of the ideas were there, but just the format of the way it was sort of conveyed to me, I wasn't very invested in, and I didn't really like it. It felt too jumpy and all over the place. So I'm gonna leave Catherine M. Valente as an author behind, which in some ways is a shame because so many of her books sound really cool, but if I don't like the way that she actually like puts them down on paper, there's no real point wasting my time. Okay, now we come to all pretty much 5-star reads, which is fantastic. There might be minor kind of tweaks and differences between them, but we're just going to consider them all 5-star. And the first one we're going to talk about is The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. This is a historical gothic fiction, and it is about a young woman whose husband dies very suddenly. They're very early in the marriage. She inherits his like big house estate. When she gets there, there's these very strange, large, human-sized wooden cutouts of people that seem to be able to move by themselves, and sort of very spooky stuff going on. She finds a diary that talks about what has happened in the house before, and it's essentially kind of a quirky ghost story at its heart, with this sort of sinister presence in the house that manifests itself through these sort of wooden cutouts. It's really, really spooky, and I deeply enjoy Laura Purcell in general. I've read 2 of her books now, and I think that the plot of this one is stronger than The Corset, although the writing style in The Corset is slightly nicer because it's her like later one, so I think she's refined her craft a little bit more. I really enjoyed the ending of this one as well. I thought that it was great, and I listened to an audiobook and it was like spine tingling in places. It was fantastic. The next one is another historical fiction. In fact, we have a bunch of historical fiction in here. It's I've been on a big historical fiction kick this year, and that is Eagle and Crane by Suzanne Rindell. This is about the Second World War, and like on the cusp of the Second World War really starting. It's about two boys who live in America. One is Japanese and one is American, but they both end up flying like stunt aeroplanes as kind of their sort of living, and they travel around, and then they get caught up in this sort of love triangle with the girl of the guy who they work for. And then the Second World War breaks out, and the Japanese guy ends up getting taken away to an internment camp, and it's kind of about their story, their love story, their kind of rivalry, and then how the war ends up shaping this, and sort of attitudes towards the war in America at that time. I love this. It was so atmospheric. I really loved the triangle and the relationship. I'm not normally one who loves love triangles, but I think that this one worked really, really well. There's kind of a sort of thriller crime mystery bit at the beginning that I thought worked really well to hang everything like onto, and I really loved the details of the flying circus and how they used their like skills with the planes, and I thought that was wonderful, and like the touring lifestyle made me very nostalgic. So it was a really, really lovely read. The next book that I read was Minette Walters' The Turn of Midnight. This is part 2 of her duology, which is the Black Death series, which is about the plague breaking out in the 1100s, I think. Oh, I can't remember, maybe a fraction later than that. In like a little rural town, and it is about the woman of the household sort of coming together to be able to save her village and sort of working together. She has very sort of strong ideas about what women can and can't do, and like religion, and it is about them trying to pull together. So this is a continuation of that story, and it's a real like slow burn, character driven, almost like isolated mystery kind of vibe, because once you get them all together in this sort of big manor house, it's about how do they survive, and the plague almost becomes like secondary to it. So this book is sort of wrapping up a lot of those loose ends, and is sort of looking at the development of the slow burn relationship that has been in this, which is the ultimate slow burn relationship. That is one minor criticism I have of this book, is I would have liked slightly more payoff from the relationship, but I understand that the historical context means what we saw was probably all we would have seen, and that's fair enough. I liked the way it wrapped up. I do think that the duology, like Minette Walters is very interested in exploring all of the characters, like the primary, secondary and kind of tertiary characters. Everyone gets their sort of moment in the sun, and they get a lot of space to sort of grow and develop, and there's a lot of different character arcs, which is really lovely in some ways, but it does make it quite a slow read. And I think if she'd wanted to, she could have condensed these 2 books and made them into one, and it would have been a little bit tighter. Having said that, I love her writing style so much that I didn't actually mind hanging out with these characters for a while. I just think that the line between book 1 and book 2 is a little arbitrary. Like, it's not like there was sort of an arc and then we kind of continued it with another duology. It was like one big book that somebody just sort of hacked in half for the hell of it. But really lovely. So many of the characters wonderful. Audiobook is great. Would totally recommend this one. It might be one to read right now, I don't know, given that it's based on the plague. Like, I'm kind of pleased I finished this before the pandemic fully kicked off. But if you are somebody who enjoys reading about things that kind of make what you're going through seem more normal, I think we're far enough into the pandemic now that this might be a good one. We've normalised the pandemic to a point where we can read about it again. Isn't that tragic? Anyway, moving on. The next 5-star read I had was The Psychology of Time Travel by Kate Mascarenhas. This book is fantastic. It is such a cool version of sci-fi time travel, and I love it so much. So it is about 4 women scientists who end up inventing time travel in the like 60s, but the thing that really makes this book very tight and kind of controlled as a time travel book is you can't go back earlier than when time travel was invented, so it keeps everything in a very, very short period of time. But there's kind of like a mystery going on in it, which was very, very cool, and like I enjoyed the characters. But the thing for me that really worked was the like consistency and coherency of how the time travel, like the effect of time travel existing, was applied to our society. Like the book talks about tax and how taxation would work on if you worked for like this bureau who do time travel. They kind of use it almost like in a Minority Report style, but not to stop the crime, but just to like make sure you catch the person doing the crime, because you can't stop things. And it kind of leans very heavily into like the deterministic, once something's happened you can't change it, which again I really enjoyed. There was all sorts of fun conversations about the paradoxes that time travel could possibly create, and like how does this fix this. It talks about like even little things like slang in the time travel world, like the fact that linguistically you can't track where it first happened because it feeds itself back through all of the different timelines. So once something happens, it happens almost simultaneously across it all because you have got constant points of contact between. Like I loved it. The the world building was fantastic, and don't get me wrong, the plot is cool as well. If you're somebody like, great, I need more than just world building from a book, this one still has it all. Like, I think it's an amazing read. The next book that I gave 5 stars to was The City of Dreaming Books by Walter Moers. I love Walter Moers. He does like absurdist fantasy, think very similar to Terry Pratchett, but in my opinion way cooler. This is his book 3 in the world of Zimonia, but they're like independent stories just set in the same world. And this is about one of the weird fantastical creatures in this world going off to Bookholm, which is a city built entirely out of like on the backs of like the book publishing industry. So there are only publishers and bookshops and things connected to bookshops, like bookshelf shops and coffee shops and all sorts of things, and it's built on top of a giant labyrinth where all of these old rare books get stored, and people like go down there to try and hunt for these rare books. And it's about our main character searching for the most amazing author he's ever read. He has this like short story from him, and he wants to track him down and find out more and read more from him because it's the most perfect thing he's ever read. And in doing so, he gets embroiled in this incredible conspiracy theory, sort of all sorts of underground crime network connected to this book world. It is so much fun, and it also really talks about the love of reading and the love of books. So as a bookworm, which I'm sure you are because you're on my channel, you'll enjoy it not only from the story perspective, but also just the like kindred spirit sense of somebody else who loves reading as much as you do. It's probably actually my favourite of all the Walter Moers. I think it's the most accessible. It's slightly tighter as a story. Like, he tends to kind of go off on these weird tangents which are always relevant, but they don't seem relevant at the time. But he does that slightly less in this one, and it is actually shorter, believe it or not, than most of his books. So I deeply enjoy this one, and I think it's a good entry point into his world. Okay, we have 2 more books to talk about, and both of them were a continuation or finishing a series. One of these is book 4 of the Memoir of Lady Trent series, and this is In the Labyrinth of Drakes by Marie Brennan. So this is a fairly beloved series on BookTube, and I've talked about it quite a few times. It's like if Victorian England had dragons and David Attenborough were a Victorian lady going off to find said dragons. It's really fun, and I definitely enjoyed book 4. I think potentially the most of all of them in the series. There are some returnings of old characters that I really loved. There's an exploration of a relationship that's developing that I also really appreciated. There's all sorts of fun political machinations. Lady Trent as a character is really coming into her own as an expert in her field that she is respected for, and I just generally really enjoyed everything as a whole. I don't want to say more than that because I don't want to spoil the series for you, and I have actually read the entire series now, and book 5 was probably my least favourite. I didn't really like the particular decision of how she ended the series, but I think that the series overall is very, very strong, and this one is definitely a firm favourite out of it. And then the final book that I deeply enjoyed and was definitely a 5-star read was The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. This is book 3 in the Winter Night trilogy, and this is the other Russian folklore book that I was talking about, and this is set in kind of medieval Russia, and it's about Vasya, who can see various creatures from the Russian folklore, and it's about her kind of big battle against this big evil, and also like her relationship that develops with the Ice King. I can't remember his name. I'm sorry, I read this so long ago now. This is the culmination of everything, and I definitely really enjoyed how Catherine Arden brought everything together. There were a few little plot points that I was like, that's not how I personally would have done it, but I think that the nostalgia for these characters is so ingrained at this point that I was just happy to hang out in the world, and I really loved how a bunch of the different things ended, and I really loved the kind of the full narrative arc that we got from so many of the characters in this. I thought it was so satisfying, and I adore Vasya, and I adore the relationship in this, and I think it is one of the epitomes of slow burn. Again, we're a big fan of the slow burn relationship right now in this video. We love a good slow burn. So again, I don't want to say too much more. I don't want to spoil it. Talking about the final books in a series makes for a deeply dissatisfying review. I know, I'm sorry. But I would say definitely check out this series if you've been kind of putting it off. If you do enjoy historical fiction and a little bit of magical realism, it is wonderful and perfect for this like getting colder, spooky season, winter vibes. It's like you can feel the chill. It's perfect. So that is it from me. I am going to be putting out in a couple of weeks another 5-star predictions video. I'm actually going to combine my fiction and non-fiction into one video and have fewer books that I predict for, just in the hope that I actually get to them a little bit more. Oh, there is one book that I haven't got to that I predicted, and that is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Erin Morgenstern wrote The Night Circus. This was her hotly anticipated second book, not connected to the world. And I was really psyched about it. I loved The Night Circus, so I was kind of expecting to love this one, but so many people have given it such like meh reviews, and it's such a big book that my brain is just going, I do not want to attempt that until by the end of the year. And honestly, I'm not hyped about it anymore. Like, so many people whose opinions I respect, that kind of their reading tastes align with mine, have just said that it was a huge letdown. I don't know if I even want to bother reading it. I might just get rid of it and unhaul it. I don't really know. If you've read The Starless Sea and you think that that would be like an absolute travesty, please do comment down below and try and change my mind. Like, I've only heard mixed or bad things about this book, so it would be interesting to hear from somebody who actually enjoyed it. But yeah, so that is it. We're gonna wrap up. We're gonna leave it there. Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye.